Thanks, Ivana. Hi, guys. Happy Friday. I want to give you guys a quick update. I don't have Carmi in the chat today. I have Carol backing me up today. Carmi's out. So if you have questions and I don't see them popping up as we're going, just know that she's watching the chat too and will respond to your questions and ask me if I miss it. All right. And so today's class is Peyote Tiles Part 2. So first thing I want to point out is that there is a previous class where we made these tiles. So this was last Friday. The replay is already up on Michael's YouTube, and we have the PDFs available for you if you missed them. There were 2 bonus patterns that were given out for 2 different adaptations that you can make with these. And today's class, we're going to show 2 ways you can put them together in jewelry. And these 2 ways are in no way comprehensive of the possibilities. As we were mentioning last week, I'm going to show you a bracelet and an earring, but you can do a lot of different things. They can become keychains, they become a purse charm, they can be made into a necklace, anything really. And you can put fringe on them and you can suspend them in different ways than I'll be doing today. I'll show you some samples of other things you can do. All right, and so here on the mat, I've got, well, a bunch of stuff. So to start out, this is the bracelet. And you can make this bracelet a couple of different lengths. So you can make it with 3 or 4. I think a good length is either 4 or 5, but you can always make the clasp longer or shorter based on how you'd like it to lay on your wrist, things like that to think about. And then we've got an earring. I'm actually wearing earrings right now that I made. How cute are these? And they're just little tiles. So any of them that you want. Here's one where I stacked them. I put them together the same way that we're putting together the bracelet, but I stacked them and threw some fringe on there. And then I went a little crazy with my tile over here and I put some little dangles. I was able to get these little head pins to go through, and I put some crystal on there. So what we're going to do in today's class is I'm going to show you how to create this little finding. We'll probably do that in the second half. It's a cool idea. It's really easy. And this has possibilities for other designs. I'm sure you guys are thinking, oh, wow, I can use this to finish a lot of my peyote pieces. And the cool thing about it is it can be adapted to fit different kinds of beads. So this is a cool one for your beady toolbox. And then the bracelet, I'm going to show how to connect, do this connection here, and then how to do a quick button loop. That's a herringbone single column, throw a button on it. So that's it. So what you'll need, you will need your tiles from last week. So the ones that you made. And again, if you're catching part 2 before part 1, not to worry, we did a whole class on making these tiles. So you can watch today, get inspired, and then go and find that and make those tiles. They looked like this when they were finished. They were just, here's one in 11-0 Toho, and this one's in 11-0 Delica. So lots of things you can do. All these patterns are available. And then you'll need some buttons. I had this button that I found from the sewing section, but choose a button that you like. You'll need a few more of the seed beads that are the edge color. So in this one, I was using a topaz, so I matched it. Today, I'm going to match this color that I used here. And then last but not least, you're going to need some wire tools and some wire. So I use 22 gauge, and I'll go over this again when we get to that part. And then you're going to need some cutters, either some round nose pliers or some bail making pliers. And nylon jaw pliers are also really handy to have because they can straighten your wire. So that's pretty much everything. Needles, your thread will be left over from last week's tiles. If you left your tails, you'll have that. It's possible to weave in if you need to. But let's go ahead and jump in with the first thing in the handout, which is connecting these 2. So I'm just going to move these out of my way just for a moment. And I'm going to get some crystal. So what I did on this is a little different than the sample in the handout. I actually went with different colors. I did a tanzanite, then I did a capri blue, a red, and here I'm going to go back to the emerald. That's the PDF color. And again, all of these SKUs are in the handout. So you can find these on the Michael's wall, or you can get them from the app by typing in the SKU. Hi. And so I'm watching the chat, guys, in case anyone's just joining. Carol's in the chat today helping us. Carmi is out, so but she'll be back next week. And Carol's happy to help you with anything. and everything you have in the way of questions, and anything I missed, she'll shout out to me. And so what I've got here, I wove in 2 of my tails just for simplicity. Because right now, I've just got these 2. I used to have one on either side. Remember, we created it. There was a tail here and a tail here. So I wove in 1 and I left the other 2. And here's my crystals. And I'm just going to grab a needle really quick. And you can use size 12, size 10. This is a pretty forgiving design. So like we were saying last week, if you had size 10 or size 12, either is going to be great. And I'm just going to thread this really quick. And so this is super, super easy. What we're going to do is just decide like which side you want to be your connecting side. I think I'm going to do this one in that order, but you can flip them if you wanted them to be facing a certain direction. I'm exiting right now from the edgemose bead here, the top edge. And that's where you'll be left off from when we made the tiles last week. And so all you gotta do is just string your crystal, bring that down. And then picking up the other tile, just go through the corresponding bead on the other side. Just right there. So come through there, tighten that down. And then the next thing I'm going to do is bring my needle back through the adjacent bead. So we went through that bead right there, and I'm going to go through the one that's right next to it. And just going to pull that tight, get that to connect, and then let's go back through our crystal. And when you get back over here, remember we were exiting from the top bead there. So what I'm going to do is go down through the second one. You're kind of making what's like a little figure 8. So you can see if I unstretch it just a little bit, we've got a little figure 8 going on here through each of these. And that's the goal. Once you've got that connection made, let's reinforce it. And in order to reinforce that connection, I'm going to go down into the beadwork 1 more row in, or column in this case. So what I'm going to do is go down through the next column. And then I'm going to just make another turn going through an adjacent bead. And then continue through the one above there. We're going to head back through the crystal. And there's a diagram in the handout for anyone who's seeing our classes for the first time. We always do a good diagram to show these thread paths, so you don't have to memorize them. It's kind of like a combination of things. You can see it done and then see the diagram and it'll all click at that point. It's kind of like the 2-part recipe for success there. So what I'm doing here is kind of the same thing on this side, going through that first bead. But now again, I'm going to go in through the next below it. It's just giving it a little extra security. And we'll do this at the top and the bottom. One more through here. There we go, back through the crystal. And I'm going to head in through the second bead. And I'm going to do this one more time here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get there. Little loop there. Okay, so what you should have is this connection, and that's pretty strong, what we did. Now I'll show you that really quick. So we made that connection. That was just with these 2 on either side. And then we came back over here, did the same thing over again, but we just went in 1 column further. And now we're hanging out over here. And I'm going to weave down here and do it one more time for the bottom. And that'll be that for connecting it. So just really quickly, I'm going to head over there. To get there, I'm just weaving down. If you have an extra tail thread hanging out, you can always use that extra tail thread. I wove mine in because it was on the other side and I used it to do this connection. So I'm over here with just 1. And That's no issue because you can just go up and down through your edge and kind of also strengthens it. So I feel like that's an added bonus. Okay, and so here I am exiting from the bottom. And we're just going to do that same thing again here with this crystal to lock in the side. And this is a 4mm bicone in case I failed to mention the size when we started. Sorry, guys. But it's all in the handout there with the skews. So there's exit from the bottom bead, going through the bottom bead on the other side. Make a turn. Come up through the adjacent bead right here. I'm going to pull that tight-ish. Let's go back through the crystal. And then I'm going to head through the bead that is just next to the crystal right here. All right, there's one. Let's do that one more time, but going in one deeper. So here I'm going to go down one more. And then I'm going to turn this way. Let's go up through this bead, through the crystal. And if I can get through this in one swoop, I actually went through 3. Let's stick with it. Why not? It doesn't hurt anything. The goal is just to get back right up here. There we go. Winnie, I am using the Nymo that I was using last week. You can build these with Wildfire if you'd like to. It'll be totally fine. I was using Nymo last week because sometimes, I don't know, my personal preference is I like the texture of peyote with a lighter thread. But other stitches, I would prefer the Wildfire. So it's kind of, but they're both going to work for you. So whichever one you made your tiles with, that's the thread you'll be using to do this join. And currently right now I'm using Nymo. Just going to head right back down. And there we go. All right. So from here, weaving in, this is also how you add thread if you find yourself needing to do that. We're just going to make a few turns. Peyote stitch is really forgiving for weaving in. You can usually do that just about anywhere. It's one of the things I really like about it. You can just start going through all of the beads and making some turns, changes in direction. So there's one example. That. And if you feel like you can see your thread on a turn, you can take that. Mine's disappeared on its own, but pretend you could see it. You can just spin the beads in your fingers like that. And it often will work those strands back in between for a really clean look. And I noticed that really helps with if you're using a contrasting color of thread for whatever reason. Like for example, if you had different colors on your edge or the inside was a different color, like if I was to try to make a turn here in these green beads, you might see my white thread a little more. Let's see what that looks like. Watching that go through. You can kind of see it, not too much, but if I do this little spin, then it goes away pretty nicely. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just go through a few more beads and then I'm going to trim this. Okay, so I'm going to grab some scissors. I didn't show those in the beginning, but they're the usual scissors I use often. They're just the Recollections brand. They do great with Wildfire and great with beading thread. So I'm just going to trim, pushing down, pulling up on the thread, pushing down with the scissors. Trim that. There we go. So I made this one with 5 this time. I'm really happy with how it came out. And I'm just going to check in and see if everyone's okay. If I missed anything, Carol, go ahead and shout out. If not, I'll just keep going.
No, everybody is really loving these tiles.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to hear it. Thanks, guys. Yeah, this is the funnest part, is like just getting to put it together for me is so satisfying. You know, making the tiles, it was really fun at first, but like on the 5th one, I was like, okay, I made 5 tiles. I want to do something else now. And so this is really satisfying to put them together.
Yeah, you know, there's just one comment here from Kylie that I think she was having an issue with the square tiles being a little slanted. Not a little, she says very slanted. Do you have a tip that may help with that?
I do. And more of a question, if the beads you were using were different brands, you might have gotten a different shape. If you're using, like, for example, all Czech beads, usually I only notice with a round seed bead, like a non-cylinder bead. I noticed that happening on a long piece, like if you were making a really long bracelet, but the squares should have been, for the most part, would have stayed pretty square. And again, unless you mixed sizes or mixed brands, that sometimes can happen to me. It would still work. It would just look a little bit maybe like wavy.
Mhm.
So hopefully that helps. If not, you can always let me know if that doesn't answer the question.
Maybe do you think that it could also be the tightness?
Possibly
Maybe
tension,
stitching
yeah.
too tight?
Possibly, yeah. I'm not sure how to. Well, so last week we covered a little bit about tension
Mhm.
as we were creating the tiles. So maybe there's a tip from back there, but let me think on that. And if anything pops in my mind for wavy, I will definitely have to repost something. Like we do have a Facebook group where I answer a lot of these questions too. So if you're not already in our Facebook group, you can find us at PDFs. Blog, it's on our blog is the best way to go to it. So if you go to blog.johnbead.com and click on join our group, that's a great way to find us. And if you tag me in there, I'll see it and I'll instantly be able to, like, you could post a picture because that would really help me to see it.
Mhm.
But yeah, great question. And thank you for that. So we've got this joined. I'm going to go ahead and create what's going to be the button loop. So I'm going to create what is showing here. And it's really easy. If you haven't done a herringbone stitch before, this might look slightly new, but it's really just looping through back and through the beads. And what I like to do for that, I'm going to go ahead and build that with this side, I think. So I've got a pretty good amount of thread left. So I'm going to weave in until I'm exiting from the 7th bead. And again, you don't have to memorize any of this. It's all right here. But basically from where we are right now, and I'm just going to weave right over here, exiting from the 7th, and I'm going to place 2 beads in the 7th and 8th bead position here on the edge of my tile. And then we're just gonna loop through that. And then after that, we're going to create the rest. So I'll show you guys how that works. So go down through here and up.
While you do that, Danielle, Christine is asking if you could make a cuff bracelet with the tiles.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. A couple ways you could do it is you could stitch them together. And one of the bonus patterns that we put up in the last class, it positions the beads where their edges, because you see how these ones, the edges are down like that. I made ones that are like this in case you like that better. And the tile version is similar. Let me show you a tile really quick. These are another of the bonus patterns. You can mix them all up. And with that, you could just stitch them together just like a peyote stitch ring. So just like that, they would connect. Zipper stitch, I guess is what it's called, right? So that's one way you could make a big cuff, and you could just keep combining them. And the cool thing there is you could add lots of different ones, and some of the flower patterns will lend themselves nicely that way too. Like this rose would work perfect like that. So some of them are, have their stems down, but even like that could still be cute. I just wanted to give you guys lots of options. So there are different orientations, patterns out there that you can, and then also you can take some peyote stitch graph paper and you can just match the dimensions here, the 30 rows, for example, and you can actually make your own patterns too. So there's sky's the limit, guys. You can do so much great stuff. Really fun. Now let me just make sure I'm exiting from the 7th bead here. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So I'm on the 7th bead. Let's get my seed beads. And let's get 2 seed beads on here. 1 and 2. And I'm going to just go down through the 8th bead. That's counting from this edge in. So you got that. Bring it down. And they're going to just kind of sit a little bit, you know, this is herringbone, so they're going to sit kind of V-shaped in on each other, which is perfect. And let's come back up through the 7th bead. And if you can, go ahead and just continue through that bead that's right above it. And we're going to do this 21 times, a total of 21. So there's 2 more beads. And now just go down through that bead we just added. And pull down. Kind of help them sit if you want to. It'll look like that. Let's go back up through this bead. And I want to just explain really quick as I go how to figure out how much of this you need. I gave a hint for this one, it's 21. And this button is about 9 millimeters. The best way, because dome sizes make a huge difference, like it'll give you the diameter usually, but you may not be able to say like for sure how many until you actually test it. So we're going to stitch this out and test it before we lock it down. So here's my next 2 beads. And I like to flip my work in my hand. We were working this way, but my herringbone, I like to work toward my right hand. So I turned it. And I'm just going to come down through the next bead here and pull tight. You help it a little bit. And then just come back up through the adjacent bead and the one we just added above. So that all locks in nicely right there. And that's single column herringbone. And it's actually a really good, it's a really good method for so many things. It's one of the stitches that we did a really early class. This was back in 2020, where we did this exact stitch, but we kept changing the seed bead size every time. So we went from 11-0, then we went to 8-0, and then 6-0, back down to 8-0, back down to 11. We made like a wavy shape. We called it the wavy herringbone stitch. And then we put a little tassel on it and we made it 3 strands. So it was like 3 separate strands that looked like a stacker bracelet. If you like this technique, there's a whole class on it. A really fun one. You guys are cracking me up in the chat. All right, and so I'm just getting on the next bead here. And I'm going to bring that up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's number 8. I'm going to go a little faster. If I've confused anyone with this single column herringbone, just let me know. I'm just going to go a little faster so I make sure I cover everything today that I want to show you guys. I'm going to go up. You guys are really cracking me up. There's some funny stuff being posted in the chat for.
Yes, for sure.
They're cool. We have such a nice crowd. I'm always so excited to see you guys on Friday. It makes my day. How am I doing? Let's see. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here's 10. And this is what I feel like is my halfway point. I'll add an extra to do the turn, but here's how I do my buttons. I'll hold the button right next to the stitching and see, I like to have a little bit of space right around it, especially since this is a really big dome. We'll test it one more time on the way back, but from here, I've done 10. And so I'm going to do roughly 10 or 11 on the way back. I tend to put on an extra one because it's got to make this little turn here, but it's something that honestly, I play with it a lot. When I'm making designs like this, I will make this design probably, I don't know, if I will make 3 or 4 different attempts to get a button sometimes, to get a button loop perfect. So I just wanted to make sure I say that you don't always land it. Like to get this calculation of 21 beads, I probably tried 3 different times and didn't like it and pulled out a few or added a few. And I'll show you that too when we get to that spot where we're going to link it back up with the tile. What to do if you feel like it's not right and how to change it. And I also just wanted to mention, if you aren't loving adding all of this work to it, some people really enjoy this process, but if you don't and you want it just to be done with your bracelet, you can just throw a wire guardian on this edge. And I'll show you really quick what that looks like on one of these other tiles, but pop a wire guardian on it.
Mhm.
You can always bend that wire guardian to suit the different size 11/0 that we're working with. So if you're using delicas like I was there, I skipped a bead in the middle so it straddles over 3 beads. I noticed with the Toho, it kind of works with 3 or 2. You can get it to work with either. And if you want it to be just perfect, those wire guardians will bend. So you can get them to line right up with your beads. Those are in Michael's in 3 different finishes. There's a gold, a stainless, and a silver. We use them a lot, so you probably already have them. If you're one of our regular students, we use them a lot. Okay, let's see where we're at. I've got I need to do about 4 more. There's 1. You see how fast this goes. This is not a big time ad for finishing, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think the beaded finish just is so beautiful. A clasp is always nice, of course, but the beaded finish always gives it a little touch.
It does, yeah. I love beaded finishes.
Mhm.
And I love seeing them, and they're always unique. They're 100% unique to that piece of jewelry. I think that's what I like so much about them.
Yes.
So let's test this and see. The way that it locks back down, and of course you can lock it down any way you'd like, but what I did is I brought down the first bead into the 9th bead in the tile. So we were working from this direction first. We came out of the 7th and went down in the 8th. So when I bring this back down, I'm going to lock it down through the 9th bead. And then I'm going to bring that back out. Depending where you are, fold it over and just look really quick. So I'm on this side. So when I bring this back down, I want to go through the 9th, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so the 9th bead is this one for me. It's the one you'll already have a bead coming out of. And let me explain that better. I'm going to show the handout really quick. I overlapped them, honestly, just because it looks really cool. So when you come back through, you'll link it through one of its own beads and one of the former. So the 8th bead will be shared by 2. And it looks just like this here on this one. See, we're sharing the 8th bead. I think I did that because I was trying to make it centered. You could easily just go 9th and 10th, and that would be just fine. No problem. I was just trying to make it go in the center with an odd count there. It also kind of keeps it popped open. So when you're putting it on, it's a little bit easier. That's not a requirement. You can really join it to the 2 open beads that are beside it too. It'll be just fine. But based on where I'm coming out on this side, I want to start with the 9th and then come up through the 10th. So down through the 9th one and then up to the 10th bead, counting from this side. When you go up through the 10th bead, you'll want to go through your open bead on your little loop there. And pull tight. And there you go. So it'll look something like that. And these 2 are sharing that same bead there. If you don't like that, go ahead and pull it out and you can put it on the next beads. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. I'm trying to figure out if I like it or not. You can always swap it to the other side. So before we do anything else, weaving in wise, I just want to test to make sure my button works. This is always a good thing to do. The number of times I've not done that and then been very mad at myself are not 0. And that's going to be pretty good, I think. You want to give some wiggle so it can be put back on and off really easy. Let's go back up through all the beads now. So let's reinforce it. We're back through this one. First thing I'm going to do is reinforce that connection. So let's go back through the adjacent bead in the band. I'm calling the button loop the band. And let's go back down through the bead below it. So you see we're coming out of that bead. I'm going to go down through the one that's next to it and then right back down through that 8th bead and tighten that up. And then I'm going to go back through the adjacent bead. And this time I'm going to carry on through the whole thing. Just reinforce this whole connection here. I'm running a little short on thread, so what I might do later is weave in another strand and reinforce this an additional time if I feel like it needs it, but let's see. See how we go here.
The twist that you have on the finish there that you're working on is really pretty too. Like it gives it an extra layer.
That's a great compliment coming from you. For those of you guys who don't know, Carol's a bead artist too, a seed bead artist. She does beautiful work, so I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
And so I went down through this bead here, guys, the one that was at the very end, and I just turned up and I started coming through the next one, and I'm reinforcing the other path in that button loop. And I'm barely going to make it with my strand here and have enough to weave in. But it's going to look pretty good. And if you haven't made your tiles yet, something I wish I'd added in part 1, but I didn't really think of it until I started working on part 2, is you can make one of your tiles with an extra long tail for this exact spot. So just whatever tile you decide is going to become your edge, if you're doing this button loop, maybe leave an extra, we cut 60 inches last week, maybe cut 75 or something. So you have a little extra to play with here. I mean, it'll make it, if you did the 60 inches, you'll have like this much and it'll still work. But I think having a little extra can't hurt. So a little tip if you haven't made those yet. And all I'm doing now is just weaving this in. We're pretty good here.
You know what I sometimes do when I'm in the same situation with a very short thread? I switch my needles to a shorter needle.
You're brilliant. That's what I'm doing. Here we go. This is a short sharp. And these are at Michael's. They're online. You can get them. If you just type in short sharp, you'll get something that's a little bit shorter than what we've been working with. These are the Beadalon size 10s here. So yeah, try this if you end up like me. Great minds. And I'm just gonna see if I can thread this. So I am working with Nymo, guys. So the threading, it's gonna be a little trickier for me than usual.
I think we have all been there with Nymo.
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely stuff, but it definitely is a little trickier.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But you know what? I think I want to make sure I show putting the button on. You guys saw me doing the weaving in here. I need to do the same thing with this. I'm having a little trouble getting it threaded. So what I'm going to do later is I'm going to wax it. I'm actually going to warm up a little bit of wax and I'm going to run my fingers over the warmed up wax and it's going to help me get it threaded. So I'll be able to weave it in. But just so I can make sure I want to show you the finding, and I'm at the 35 mark. So I'm going to switch over here. Let's put the button on. I've already woven in to the 7th position here. So it's the 7th bead on both the button side and the button loop side. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and needle up this one. There we go. Oh, Nymo. I'm curious, what is everybody's favorite thread? I'm going to trim this one. Got a little bit of fray going here.
Let's see, we have Wildfire,
I love wildfire too.
Wildfire lot, fire line. Yeah, fire line.
Lots of great options.
Yes, I
And
think
that's
it
the cool
depends on
thing.
the project, right? Sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah. Like, do you feel like the flow of your stitching? I feel like it needs like lighter threads if you're doing peyote. And so here I am on this side, 7th bead again. And all you really need to do, and that's here in the handout to you. Let's flip over and take a quick look at that. Actually, sorry, here it is. We're gonna just pick up 2 seed beads and go through our button and then pick up 2 more seed beads. It's gonna attach just like that through those center 2 beads. Super easy, and just reinforce it and it'll work out pretty good. And just gonna bring 2 more seed beads on after my button. So what we got here is, this looks like I missed a bead, unless it went inside my button. It did. It actually went in there. That didn't happen with my my button that I was using before. So let's troubleshoot that really quick. I'm gonna put on 1 more bead.
Is it stuck in the button?
It is stuck inside the button. So if you're using the same buttons I am, guys, that can happen. Didn't happen to me with my last one though. That was kind of weird. But it's fixable because now, I don't know if you guys can see it, but the button is like just right there. See? That's the seed bead inside of it. Luckily, I'm using the same colors. So it's not gonna stand out so much. Okay, so I put an extra seed bead on that side to cover that. And I'm gonna get these extra 2 here. Extra 1, sorry. And we'll come down through this next bead over here. So you can kind of decide if you like what I did. Let me show you on this one, actually. I went through those 2 beads here. You could stagger it more and skip one and have it go through the 3rd. I was trying to make my shank thinner so that it would go into the buttonhole easier. So that's why I did it this way, but I think it might, and depending what button you're using, you can change that up if you want to. And then we'll just go through once. And I'll go through 1 more time. But I'm going to go down through another column. Same thing we did when we were adding the crystals. We're just going to reinforce by going down 1 more set, right? And then come back up. And then go up through all of those. I made it through all 4 serendipitously there. And that's pretty much it. So you'll just go ahead and reinforce this maybe 1 more time, weave in those strands. And there's one way, not the only way, but just one way that you can create a really cute button closure for your bracelet. Yay. Thanks, Gail. I'm getting some thumbs up. So I always appreciate it.
Yes, that is
Thank
beautiful.
you so much. So, right, we're going to move on to the earrings. I want to make sure I cover that in a little bit of detail because it's something that's kind of cool. And I feel like is a lot of potential to become lots of things. So I have two things here to show you. Here's some finished ones. And again, it's just a little looped 22 gauge wire. I'm going to be using this 22 gauge round German style wire. German style is going to suit you a little better than like a craft wire because you want it to be kind of strong. But the loops are pretty tiny. So I feel like, you know, the smaller you make a loop, the stronger it can become. The loops are about that big, which is, I think, 2 millimeters, close to. So it's going to be a pretty good size. That's the smallest size I had on my pliers. Let me show you my pliers really quick. So I used the Beadalon bail making plier. There's a couple different versions now at Michael's, and some of them are online only. So browse and find one you like. The majority of them have these measurements. And the smallest is going to be this little 2 millimeter guy right here. So that's what I'm going to use. If you, for some reason, are able to find one with a smaller loop, you can get down to the size of a Delica. I've heard they exist. I don't currently own any, but hey, if they do, let me know. Send me a link because I'm in the market for something with a smaller version of that. It just may not be strong enough. The one thing I thought of was maybe like, you know how you finish memory wire? There's some pliers made for that. Some of those might come down in size. But for now, what I've got and what is the standard one that you'll find in the store is a 2mm, and it's working great. It's going to look like this when we're done. It's really tiny but mighty, right? So easy to make. Let's start with 2 inches of wire. I'm going to grab my tape measure. Get 2 inches here. And it's forgiving too, so it doesn't have to be super precise or exact. A lot of your wire is going to come off the spool or from the package with some memory, looking a little bit like that. So what I like to do is I will just run my pliers along it. These are Nylon Jaw Pliers. I'm just going to pinch the end here to hold it and just pull. So we're just pulling like that until we get a mostly straight piece. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but close is good enough. And so there's my 2 inches, 22 gauge wire. All right, and then I'm going to use the 3rd largest. So I've got the smallest here, the next size up, and this size is my 3rd largest. And so I'm going to pick this up, and I'm going to kind of try to find the midpoint, roughly about there, and I'm just eyeballing it. Get it as close as I can. And then just bring those to meet each other. So we're making kind of a little pin. And don't worry if you didn't get it perfect. I didn't get mine perfect. I've got one that's a little longer than the other. No problem. I'm just going to trim it so they're pretty close to each other. So you've got something that looks like that. And so this next part, it's pretty easy, but what I found was happening to me was that I was able to get my loops started, but then they stopped syncing. So I was able to start these 2 loops together, and then I closed them up more individually. And so I'm going to show you what I did there. Also, I tried to get them so that the loops were forming facing inward, but that's not required. Here's one where I didn't do that, and it still looks great. This one is facing out. They're both going to work, but if you're looking to make it just absolutely perfect, you can try to make them both fold in the inward direction, the coils. So let me show you what I mean. So I've got this piece that we just made. I've got it sitting in between these 2, and I want to make sure I'm rolling over the small one here again. We're going to be working on the smallest. So just go ahead and bend it forward around that. Keep going until you meet like that. Now here's where it might work for you or it might not. First thing I'm going to do, let's go ahead and take it off the pliers just so I can show you. I usually keep them on, but here's what we've got so far. I want to try to make each of these coils sit toward the inside. We can try to do them together, but what I found is it was much easier actually to do them individually from this point. But let's see, let's try. I always try. So I'm guiding each of these in the center. Let's see how that looks.
Danielle,
Yeah.
for those people that may not feel very comfortable working with wire, will the wire guardians work the same way?
For this configuration, they won't. And I can explain that a little bit. Okay, so when we have peyote stitch, there's 2 edges to it. You're going to have an edge where there's up and down beads like this, see? And then you're going to have an edge that's whole side up, open. And if that is your top, awesome. And that's the case on some of the other patterns. So my recommendation is to make this kind of pattern where your up beads, your up and down beads are your side. Then you can easily put that wire guardian here on the top.
I see, right.
Now it might be possible, I'm just thinking out loud. It might be possible to stitch a wire guardian. And if we have any time here after showing this and there's no questions, I can try to do that. What you would have to do is often when you exit from a bead like this and you go through another bead and come back down and go through the other side, you can cause something to lock in place in a way that's kind of like a side step. So let me grab some of these and just have it ready. And if we have time at the end, these guys are stainless from the findings wall. Setting this aside to remind me. And if we've got time after this, I'll show that. But right now I'm just gonna go ahead and finish. So what I've got going here, I just want to highlight one more time. See how my coils are starting to head on the inside, but they're not going at the same speed anymore. This one's going faster than that one. I have that happen all the time. So now from here on out, what I was doing just to keep it real easy is I was working each side individually. So I'm gonna bring those pliers back through the hole here and let's just roll it up. And so what am I going for? Well, I'm going to decide what's my front and I'm going to roll until you see the little end of it, until that's facing kind of the inside. So right about there. And then let's just match it with the side. Just keep rolling it up. And then if you want to, once you've got them rolled up, you can bring them both on the pliers and just check it out. How do we feel about that? It looks pretty good. And I'm going to stop there because I feel like it's good. There is one other extra little thing you can do. You can get in here and push those insides down, either with these pliers or with some chain nose. Just kind of pushing them toward the inside. And last but not least, this is another optional thing, but you can keep them on the pliers for just one more second and grab some square nose. So I'm going to show you my square nose really quick. These are ones that are a little bit wider than a chain nose. They're sometimes called flat nose. Flat nose, square nose, or even just a pair of chain nose would also work. And what I was doing is just kind of giving it a bend up, because you know when like you do a simple loop, how it has that little bend. This is only if you like it, you can give it the little bend that a simple loop has, just so it kind of pops up from the center. And it's easier to see on this one. See how I gave it that little pop? And this one didn't come out as beautiful. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more pretty. But just kind of like that. And don't remember if this was the new or the old one, but just kind of like that. So it'll look a little bit bent forward. Either way, it's going to work. Super simple idea. Notice that the widths are different. So like, here's one I made earlier. Here's the one we just made, a little wider. No problem. You can just bring them together. And it looks like I even made that one a little smaller. You're going to see variation. And it's going to be totally fine. No two are going to be exactly alike. You can always change it too. Like, for example, if I decided I want this one to be the same height as this one, because I'm going to match it because it's going to be an earring, you can still put them back on the pliers, roll them up a little more. See if that's a little better. So let's stitch that in. We've got a few minutes here. And I've got one ready to go here. And again, this is Nymo. This is the Nymo we were using last week for our demo. And let's see, let's find my needle again. And so how you would stitch this in, just starting from where I was when I ended off this tile last week, is just left there on the corner. Get that needle threaded. Woohoo! All right. So I need to get here. I'm over here. So I'm just going to go down through the adjacent bead that's on this side. I'm going to just head in that direction. And with peyote stitch, you kind of want to go through. You can go diagonal. And you can zigzag, like I'm doing here. Okay. And stop after you've crossed 1, 2, 3 beads. You're coming up through the 4th bead. So here's my 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's grab my little finding. We'll go through one side of it. Bring it down. Take a quick look, make sure I'm happy with the width of it. So what I'm doing here is I'm just testing to make sure the width is good between my 2 beads. And it looks good. So I've gone through the finding. Now I'm going to go through the next up bead. Here's the next up bead right here. And don't worry if it falls out. Mine fell out. That's okay. I'm just going to put it right back in position. There we go. It did a little bit of a spin on me. All right, so I've gone through the next up bead here. Oh, so Julie has a question about the color of thread. So in this case, last week, for clarity, I was working with the black thread so people could see it. But, and I wish I'd done that on the demo for today, but I was making it match. I was matching my thread color with my edge beads. So like my edge beads were white, so I was matching it with white thread. But in the case of this one, there's actually a lot going on here that I could talk about. I started it with black and finished it with white. So you see the difference? The black thread, and this is finished with white thread and it's woven in. It really does show, even on an opaque bead. This is an opaque frosted white. So it's kind of interesting. So I just went through that up bead, right there. And I'm going to go through the next hole on the next part of the finding. And after this, it gets easier because it's not going to move on me anymore. And then just go through the next up bead. I'm going slow. I'm watching for tanglies. But there we go. So now that's like all locked in right there. Let's reinforce it. Let's go back through. So do a turn. What I like to do is go through a few more beads in that direction. So maybe one, maybe two more, and then turn back. So that I'm headed back at the right angle here. So there's one more. Okay, let's turn.
So your finding is hugging that one bead in the middle, right?
Yeah. It's acting like, basically what it's doing is it's filling the down beads that are in those two positions. It's acting like a bead, like a stitch in seed bead, right? And that's something that I like because it makes it so that this is a very seamless, weightless way to finish your peyote. I do think this would be really nice for bracelets. The idea came to me for the earring, but I was thinking, gosh, this would be very cool as a way to end, even if you had a very thin, because like so many of the styles right now, have you noticed, are like kind of minimalist, especially delicate bracelets. They're doing like color block, single column stuff. You could make this small enough to finish a single column delicate bracelet and it would be perfect. And I was just having another thought as I was working on making the finding, just going back to this size here. I do think that a lot of our round nose pliers get smaller than that at the tip. If you took a Sharpie and you did a little line on your round nose pliers and you rolled in the same position, you would get this round. And it would, I feel like the only reason I really like the bail making is every loop is the same diameter. You'd have to kind of play with that. Like once you've done one full rotation, you'd have to bring it back up on the round nose plier and follow that Sharpie line for 2 rotations. It's doable, a little trickier, but that's one way you could get it smaller than the smallest bail making one. I just recommend playing with it. Honestly, that's how you'll come up with even better ideas. Is like, you'll just be like, oh, hang on, this worked. And then message me and tell me because I want to know if that works. That's one of my dreams, is to have a very tiny one. But this one here, I feel like it's perfect for the Toho bead size that I'm using, the 11-0. This is my 3rd pass reinforcing. Just coming through, finding in the next bead and finding in the next up bead. And that's pretty much all you got to do. And I made it through all of those in one swoop. How lucky is that? Pretty cool. So I won't make you guys watch me weave in because that's all I have left to do here. Weaving it in, but putting an ear wire on, super simple. You just open up an ear wire with your chain nose pliers, open up the loop here, and then just pop that on. And you've got a beautiful earring. And you can match them, or you can decide, you know, I don't want them to match. And if you want them to have embellishment, you can add embellishment. We did that here. Set that one aside, something here. Here it is. I was just playing. What I used here are just some of these head pins. the head pins fit, and these are just regular wrapped loops. And they fit right in the bead. They're not perfect. They're a little bit messy, but I still, at a distance, no one's going to see that. I also did build my last one up a bead for symmetry. Not in love with that, but it is, again, not super noticeable and looks really cute. It just doesn't have the sway of these other ones. So, but in order to have that be symmetrical, this would have to be odd count. I don't know. I wasn't sure which way to make that go. Or actually, even +1, I'm not sure. Something you could play with though. And so this one just needs its little loop put on it, and it will be done too. So there's 3 versions. There's that. If you're doing the other pattern and you want to pop a wire guardian on it, we have a few classes where we've done those. So I feel like that's something you guys have seen. I wanted to show what I did here. It's a little unusual. I went every other bead with white, and then I did every other bead with red, and I alternated from 2 counts to 8. And then I used bicones to turn. It's like a little 2-layered fringe there. That one came out really cool. And I also added a bicone in the center. I wasn't able to get it perfectly centered. I could have tried harder, but I thought it was cute, just like that. Okay, and last but not least, let's show that we're at the 3-minute mark. But I do want to show you guys just real quick what would happen if you really want to use a wire guardian here. All right, so again, these are stainless wire guardians. I'm going to throw my needle on here. I'm going to go a little over, but it's kind of cool to see this. So let's come up. What I'm doing right now is just getting to the center. I'm just weaving through. Bring that back over here. One more. Okay, so get to where you think you're kind of close to being in the center. So for me, that's like right about here. Go ahead and go through the down bead. We're going to anchor these in the down beads. So that's the down bead I'm coming out of. I don't know if you guys can see it right there. There's my down bead. I'm coming out of this one. This one right here. Okay, so let's go through the wire guardian. First, let's make sure it's got the right width. We might have to do something there. Actually, that's going to work. So I don't need to adjust it. Let's come up through here, go over the well and down, and then bring this down to meet the next down bead. So again, I'm coming out of this bead right here, and I want to go through this down bead right here. I'm just going to loop this way through it. And then come up through this bead right here, this side right here. So do you see what I did there? I came out of the bead on one side. And oops, my Nymo is going a little crazy. But do you see how we can anchor it like that? We hugged the bead there. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. I'm going to come back around. My Nymo went a little crazy, guys. Sorry, it got a little shredded. But I'm going kind of fast. And I'm coming down through the next side here. If I can get through it. And back over here, we just take a quick look. And you can see where I was exiting from this bead on that side. I want to go through, just through the opposite direction. And what that'll do is it'll make that bead hug the wire guardian. And it should sit like that. So maybe that helps somebody who doesn't want to do that finding and ignore the nasty shredded Nymo that I did there, what I did. But that should work pretty good. And it looks pretty nice too. And you could also end a lot of other pieces like that.
That's a great option.
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. I'm going to throw on the mat next week. We do have all of our May classes up as well. But next week, we're going to do a gemstone bracelet. There's currently a link posted on the Facebook group and in our stories too. So we're doing this cute gemstone earring and bracelet set. Really nice.
Oh, that's beautiful, Danielle.
I really like it. I hope you'll turn in for that one, Carol, next week with us, because that will be so. It's going to be really fun. I'm excited about the amazonite. Look at the amazonite there.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Came out really cool. It looks really neat on. I have been wearing it. I keep remembering to put it back. Last week I couldn't show it because I was wearing it and I left it somewhere. So yeah, so the whole like PDF parts list, all that stuff, it's on michaels.com/classes. You should be able to find it there. If you make something from today or from any of our classes, please share with us by tagging hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels and hashtag John Bead. And of course, you can find me at Danielle Works Jewelry. You can message me there or join our Facebook group. And in our Facebook group, we have really beautiful inspiration posted by all of our students and other team members. So lots of great stuff that you can find there. And all of our past classes and links to videos can be found there as well. Both at the PDF, it's called PDFs and Patterns by John Bead is the Facebook group. Best way to find it though is to go to blog.johnbead.com and browse there and you can sign up. So yeah, I'm going to pop back my earrings on and start my Friday. Wish you guys a really great, happy weekend and lots of beading. And I can't wait to see what you make. So have a great weekend, guys. Bye. Hugs.